seeing y'all's faces. It's seeing your hands lifted on high as we sing songs unto the Lord. It's seeing your desire, your own hunger and thirst in being here, your willingness, your capacity for love. I've already interacted with several of you who have been just incredibly impressed and can't wait to see what the rest of this weekend holds. I'm going to blow through a couple of more pictures to give you an idea of the kinds of things I thirst for. I do thirst for home, being that I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, which used to be the home of Taylor Swift. We did meet once briefly at dinner, not the same dinner table, but at a restaurant. It was awesome. That's my skyline. Literally, that's the city where my heart seems to be at rest more often than anywhere else. So I often thirst for home. I get a little bit homesick. Right now, I'm feeling that. I also have a thirst to belong. Okay, so at a young age, I started playing football. And that's me at about your age. Okay, I'm a sophomore in high school. I've just finished up a week of camp. That means we had 4 days, every day for about 5 days straight. And of course, all the seniors would shave all the JV guys' heads, and I looked like a fool. And yet was a part of that because it was a thirst to belong. And it all worked out in the end. We ended up winning a state championship my senior year and had a heck of a time growing in virtue and brotherhood and a real sense of camaraderie with those men. Very few of whom I'm still friends with today, but memories are sweet and strong with those guys. Okay, I have a thirst for belonging also with my family. How many of you guys love your family out there? Yeah. Right there, I've got my brother-in-law, my sister, my beautiful nephew, sort of like godparents, almost like surrogate grandparents. My mom, myself, my dad is the only one not pictured in that picture. He's absolutely amazing, and I'm just so grateful to be a part of a family. Now, we're pretty broken, though. My mom and my dad got divorced 7 years ago. My brother died about 4.5 years ago. And so it's amazing to see that even in the midst of our love for something like family, we thirst for more. We thirst for wholeness. We thirst for completeness. We thirst really for things to be as they are meant to be. I'm sure many of you can relate to that sadness, perhaps, and knowing that your family is not quite what it could be at all times. And last I checked, no family is. Families struggle, don't we? We struggle to be who we want to be. As St. Paul says, we so often do the things that we don't want to do. We don't do the very things that we want to do. Now, nothing about me is I'm a musician. I like playing the piano. I write a lot of film scores for movies that don't exist. Does anybody relate to that? Anybody out there? All right, so this next shot is actually a community of artists that I'm a part of back in Nashville, Tennessee called Love Good Music. And we do a lot to support these young singer-songwriters who really believe in the power of beauty to evangelize culture. Most of them are in pop, folk, rock, singer-songwriter type genres, not necessarily Christian music or even church music. But there's a need for each of them to feel like they belong. They thirst to share their gift with the world, but to not do it alone. So there's really something quite powerful in that. Now, I also thirst for adventure. How many of you guys love the idea of adventure? Okay, so back in January, I had the privilege of waking up on a dirt cave floor in Middle Tennessee. This was probably like January 19th. I had to rush to a baptism on my way to the airport, and before you knew it, I was on my way, of all places, to New Zealand. Okay, has anybody ever been to New Zealand by chance? Yeah, it's one of the most beautiful places in the world, and there was, in fact, a few Hobbit sightings. Yep, that's it right there. That's Hobbiton. To be honest, I've never seen anything quite that beautiful before. They have literally preserved about 50 of those Hobbit holes from the filming of the 3 Hobbit movies and Lord of the Rings trilogy as well. And I'm about to finish The Two Towers. If anybody's reading these books currently, we can talk about it later. But literally, for the first time in my life, I'm finally plowing through this adventure that is Middle-earth. And one of the greatest pieces of advice and wisdom I have gained so far from this comes from Gandalf, who says that not all who wander are lost. Not all who wander are lost. So if you have a thirst for adventure, perhaps you can trust it at times that the Lord's going to take you where he needs to, one little step at a time. Now, another thirst for adventure was fulfilled back in March. I spent 6 weeks, as I mentioned, in England, just going through parishes and schools, literally proclaiming the gospel in some cases to young people who had never heard the name of Christ before. A lot of the Catholic schools in England are government funded, which literally means there's no Catholic identity or culture at all. And I had this beautiful Muslim girl walk up to me at the end of a talk, and she said, "Jimmy, I've never felt so close to God before, but I don't know what that means because I'm Muslim. What does it mean for me to have a relationship with Jesus Christ?" This young man walks up to me probably a couple days later, similar talk, and he said, "Jimmy, I really like to go to confession, but I don't know how." And I turned to the young man and I said, well, that's a really beautiful desire that you have. Have you ever been at confession before? And he said, well, no, I'm not even Catholic. Turns out he's not even been baptized. We've been in touch on Twitter ever since, and right now he's finding out a way with his mom and a parish priest to come into the church. How many of us can recognize that thirst for adventure, particularly with Christ? But about halfway through this 6-week pilgrimage, mission through 2 dioceses in England, I found myself in the Swiss Alps, and I happen to love skiing more than anything else. How many of you all have been up to Loon Mountain before? I know that's pretty close to here for the New Hampshire people. So I was just there back in, I guess it was December, and like I could literally ski even if I was by myself, though I'm an extrovert off the scale, I could ski by myself for days before I got bored. But this particular day, I decided to take my gloves off in the middle of the Swiss Alps and catch a little bit on footage, on camera, and pretty much almost died. Check this out. Middle of the Swiss Alps right now. Verso l'alto, 10,000 feet. That's 2 miles in the sky. We got the beautiful Matterhorn over there. God's beautiful creation all around me. Woo! Losing control. Where should be? Oh yeah. Unbelievable. Look at this. That's it right there. That's it. Oh yeah. It's beautiful. You have to admit I played that off pretty well. So we have any avid skiers out there? Yeah, so I have a great thirst for adventure, and I find increasingly that the more I can adventure in the midst of God's creation, in the midst of the beautiful things of this world, the more I can really understand the adventure that is in fact relationship with Christ. And as I mentioned, I just got off of this incredible week-long backpacking trip and discipleship retreat with about 30 high school guys on the West Coast, an amazing priest, a handful of dads. We didn't have running water. We didn't have electricity. We certainly didn't have internet or cell phone service. And I saw some of the most beautiful things my eyes have ever seen. So here, it's a thirst for beauty. And I mentioned I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. So, I love music. Adele, by the way, happens to be my favorite female artist at the moment. Like, I really can't seem to stop listening to her new album. It's on repeat. I'm not incredibly proud of this, but it's on repeat most days. And that, again, ties into this thirst I think a lot of us have for beauty, okay? But check out some of these images now from my camping trip. This first one is of Cooper Lake, all right? Now, if you've ever been to the Pacific Northwest, you're not going to be surprised by these images. I had never been until about a year and a half ago. This would be a very normal sight to see a beautiful lake, these distant mountains covered in snow, even this time of the year. And one particular day during this camping trip, we decided we were going to go on a 12-mile hike. And that sounds really cool and really brilliant in the moment until you're like 3 miles in and you want to collapse, okay? And there was about 30 of us, so keeping 30 people together over the course of a day-long hike was next to impossible. So by the time we're halfway through, we're like in groups of 3 or 4 at best. And like I'm literally coming up to these different parts in the hike where there's literally no trailblazing that's taking place whatsoever. So we've got, brush and I don't know what else coming up to like mid-thigh, all right? We're, slipping through holes and cracks and crevices of these rocks. We're ascending this incredible mountain. I'm coming across guys who literally have given up and like are literally in the middle of a nap as we come up against them and say, let's go, keep on moving. And then we think that we're actually eventually going to get to a lake, but we never find this lake. And we also only packed about 1 bottle of water per person, so you can imagine again how thirsty we were at this point. So check out some of these images. That's the glacier that we ended up finding. Again, not a lake, but a glacier. Pretty cool. Come up a little bit closer on it. This next image you'll see, this is actually a pretty beautiful structure. And believe it or not, that dirty piece of ice that's been sitting there for months, slowly melting, suddenly actually became our sustenance and our source for water. That is my hand right there. Compare and contrast. You see the resemblance? That's it. And then we're with this priest who's telling us about how all these people who have died going through ice caves like this, all right? And so we're thinking, well, this is going to be a risk, but maybe one that we're willing to take. And sure enough, this amazing priest just goes face first into this thing. And so we start following, and we come up against this incredible blue light, which was probably the most dangerous part of all, because that means the ice was actually pretty thin right there, right? And the sun was coming down, and there we are, exhausted, like barely quenching our thirst with that dripping water, a little bit upset and disappointed that we never came across this beautiful lake, but instead we're now spelunking through an ice cave. And we see this piercing blue, which you can't help but think of Our Lady when you see that color blue, the Blessed Mother. And then check out this next image. It's a view from the very end of the glacier overlooking the mountains. And in this next image, you'll see some of the chumps that I was on this hike with. Just some incredible group of guys growing in holiness, growing in their desire for Christ, their thirst for adventure with him. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I actually think that desire is one of the most powerful things in my life. If my heart desires something, I go after it. And I don't seem to hesitate. In fact, I'm really nothing without desire. If some of you are sitting in your chairs tonight and you have no idea what you're doing here right now, and frankly, you don't even really want to be here, you're not interested in a relationship with Christ, or perhaps you've been here and you've done this before, and you're not really sure how God could possibly do something new and miraculous again. Or maybe you're swimming around in the lake, and it's already kind of a cool day, and you forget that you're thirsty, and eventually you get one of those dehydration headaches. And only at that point do you even realize your need for water. I don't know where you guys are tonight, but perhaps we can all agree that desire is a powerful mover within our lives, within our souls. And C.S. Lewis says it's actually one of the greatest indicators, one of the greatest proofs of the existence of God. Check this out. C.S. Lewis says, creatures are not born with desire unless satisfaction for those desires exists. A baby feels hunger. Well, there is such a thing as food. A duckling wants to swim. Well, there is such a thing as water. Men feel sexual desire. Well, there is such a thing as sex. If I find in myself a desire which in experience in this world, no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I am made for another world. Do we realize that? That there's infinite desire in our heart and in our soul that will not be satisfied this side of heaven. That in fact, we are sons and daughters of glory. We are made for a heavenly realm, a heavenly kingdom that we just catch glimpses of in this earthly sojourn. Who is it then can satisfy these deepest desires, these deepest thirsts within us? Who is the one who can come and actually bring sweetness and repose to our heart and to our soul? Just imagine yourself for a moment at the beginning of time, at the beginning of God's creation, as the Holy Spirit is hovering over the waters, as Jesus with the Father is bringing all things into existence. Imagine the glory. Imagine the beauty of that. Let your heart ache for that. To ache for that harmony that we once all had in the Garden of Eden. And then realize that we messed things up. That yes, we ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And therefore our desires are all out of whack. The three most important effects of the fall, the most tragic effects of the fall, is that our intellect is darkened, our will is weakened, and our passions are disordered. What that basically means is our pursuit of truth, goodness, and beauty are now all messed up. What we thought was once true isn't, because this world offers us so many counterfeits that we think are going to satisfy and don't, over and over and over again. What we thought was once beautiful, in fact, isn't. Again, counterfeits are all around us. Father Cantalamessa, he's the preacher to the papal household. He says that beauty can best be understood as that which has been touched by the presence of God. It's not a bad definition of beauty. That which has been touched by the presence of God. But he goes on to say that God is not the only one covered in beauty, that evil imitates beauty and makes it profoundly ambiguous. That's why we settle for sin, because we forget that the thirst and the longing that is deep within us is actually for God himself. And that last transcendental of goodness, we've never lived in a more morally decrepit time. Relativism has literally eliminated any possibility of true public debate on what is right and what is wrong. And so tonight I want to appeal to your sense of the beautiful, your thirst for glory. I want to share a song from one of those film scores, again, belonging to a movie that doesn't exist, and it's called Origins. I encourage you to close your eyes and allow your imagination, a powerful part of your soul, to sort of run wild a little bit. Imagine yourself there at the waters of creation. Imagine yourself there as glory is made manifest. Realize your thirst for God and you're settling for all the counterfeits. And again, just allow your imagination to run for just a few moments. What desires rise up in your heart? I'm sure many of us would agree that there's no deeper thirst in each of us than to love and be loved. And that is there because we're made in the image of a God who is a furious love affair, a communion of love. Hope you enjoy this song. Again, it's called Origins. St. Thomas Aquinas. St. Thomas Aquinas has a very simple definition of glory. He says it's divine beauty. It's what we all long for. It's what we're made from. It's what we're destined for. How many of us truly thirst for the glory of God? How many can stand with Christ there at the foot of the cross and say, my heart is zealous for the glory of the Father? And the overflow of that becomes my zeal for souls. I don't know about y'all, but that's not exactly where my heart is at every given moment. But I can tell you, it's the one thing that helps me avoid sin the most. It's the one thing that helps me avoid misery the most, to realize that the glory of God is the deepest desire of my heart, or at least should be. And y'all, it's the work of a lifetime to allow our intellect to no longer be darkened, but rather enlightened by grace, the life of God within us. To allow our will to be strengthened so that in the face of sin, the strength of Jesus in us fights back. To allow those passions to be ordered, to be purified. Of course, one of the great dangers of a weekend like this is that we worship the consolations of God and not the God of consolations. God doesn't want us zealous for all the good feelings we're going to have tonight in adoration. He wants us zealous for himself, period. It's the image of God written into your heart at baptism, really written into your heart at your conception. And everything short of that will never satisfy. All I can say is if I was your older brother and I had a little bit of one-on-one time with each of you, I would grab you by the shoulders and I would look you in the eyes. I hope with the love of Christ himself, the tenderness of the Father. And I would say, let's be saints together. Let's not settle for what the world is offering us anymore. Because this world is dark and despairing. There aren't enough saints living among us. It's why the culture is sick and dying. And what does it mean to be a saint? It means to be another Christ, to be zealous for the Father's glory, to realize that we're not made for this earth, but for heaven, to storm heaven and bring an army of souls with us. I want to close with this scripture passage that many of you will be unpacking, particularly tomorrow morning. It's from the Gospel of John. At this point, Jesus was on his way back home to Galilee. And on his way, he stopped in Samaria, and he came across this woman at the well, at Jacob's well. He's tired. He's thirsty. God himself in his sacred humanity is tired and thirsty. And this is what he says to the woman at the well. If you knew the gift of God and who is saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. The woman said to him, Sir, you do not even have a bucket, and the cistern is deep. Where then can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us this cistern and drank from it himself with his children and his flocks? Jesus answered and said to her, Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water that I shall give will never thirst. The water I shall give will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life.